Welcome to another episode of 2,730 Years and Counting. Today is going to be a really fun interview because it's with a gentleman that I have not talked to for a good 3 years. And any of you who have been living for the last 3 years know how crazy that's been and how it feels like forever ago. He's a friend of mine that I interviewed many times while he was in Costa Rica. But we're going to have him on tonight. His name is Steve Motria. Steve's got some things, as you might imagine, over the last 3 years. He's accumulated a few more facts and a few more things from Abba that are things that we all need to hear about. So I'm going to get out of the way and keep my mouth shut, or at least somewhat shut. And we'll look forward to hearing what Steve has to say. So thank you. And there, go right ahead.
All right, cool. You know, Gene, it's like I always try to do my best to stay open when it comes to Bible prophecy. And anyone who's followed any of my teachings, they'll say that, you know, I present outside the box type teachings, if you will, you know, things that people may not have thought of or considered before. And I'm not saying they're right, but I do think they have some kind of validity for at least to keep an eye on them. And I've made teachings that actually, you know, show all these different perspectives of, well, maybe we should be looking at the spring, second Passover even. Well, hey, what about the 4 fasts that are turned into feasts? All these different things that would appear to contradict one another, but it's not. It's just simply showing us that there's lots of perspectives for us to be keeping our eyes open for the return of Yeshua, you know.
Absolutely.
And right, and how things can play out in the end times. And I have a whole bunch of notes here in front of me that I want to share with you. And as I was going through it about, an hour ago, I'm going, oh my goodness gracious, there's no way I can cover all this. It's just so much, you know.
Darn, you mean I'll have to have you back again? Oh.
Right, there you go. Well, I want to share a thought here regarding Abraham.
Okay.
And what I'm going to present, again, is outside the box.
Mhm.
So I pray that people at least listen to it, you know, consider it, pray about it, as I always say at the end of my teachings, you know, but to more than anything, just be open.
Mhm.
And because my concern is that so many times I talk to people on prophecy and stuff, and man, they are just so lock solid on their view that,
Mhm.
oh, this is right, no, you're wrong. And yeah, okay, maybe I am wrong, but what if I am right? Or maybe just a part of it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to do, is just be willing to be open. Because what if I can say it this way, all hell hits the fan, okay, and things start, and it doesn't start the way you think it was going to start.
Right.
Then we're all rocked, you know.
Yeah.
And so, but yet if we're open to these different views, you can say, oh, I remember so and so said this or so and so said that, and then you can kind of, you know, piece things together then, you know. And so that's my prayer. So all that being said, the 400 days spoken to Abraham, you know, Abraham, the father of the faith, okay. And these are thoughts that I have put together with a friend of mine and some other things going on. And I just feel there's something to the 400 days of Abraham. In Genesis 15, you know, Yahweh said to him, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. Okay. And I know there's I just saw a video someone shared with me saying that these 400 years are not regarding the days immediately thereafter, but sometime in the future. And they tried to apply it to the Mayflower compact and stuff, which is very interesting. However, there's so much I could say as far as why I disagree with that. First of all, they'll bring out that, okay, so it's 400 years spoken to Abraham. Well, then we know it was 430 years later that it came to pass. Okay, so then they'll say, well, this is why it's not it. But excuse me, on all my teachings, our daily devotions, we have a teaching at the bottom. If you scroll down to the bottom, and it says, you know, the title of it is "How Long Were the Israelites in Egypt?"
Mhm.
And it goes into showing how the promise came at this date to Abraham. It was fulfilled with 430 years later with Moses leading them out of Egypt.
Right.
The thing is, Abraham didn't have any descendants until 25 years later.
Right.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so then
Ah.
when you have Isaac, who was 5 years old,
Mhm.
that's when he started being mistreated by Ishmael. Okay,
Right.
so now we see the 400 years beginning at that time frame, 30 years
Yes.
later.
Uh-huh.
And
Mhm.
so my whole point is that those 400 years were spoken of as years, and they were fulfilled, I think, in that light. Excuse me. Now, there's a principle that some hold to in how a day can represent a year
Mhm.
and a year can represent a day when it comes to biblical prophecy. And there's some verses that can give some credibility, if I can say, to this theory and should cause us to give serious thought to it. I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's right and I'm not saying it's wrong, but I do think it brings up some interesting points for us to consider: a day, a year, and a year, a day. For example, we have a day for each year in the account of the 10 spies returning with the bad report to Moses. And as a result, they had 40, it was 40
Yes.
days they were there, turned into
Right.
what? 40 years.
40
Okay.
years.
Right.
That's
So
right.
there's a day for a year and a year for a day. And
Mhm.
then we have in Ezekiel chapter 4, Ezekiel's told to lay for 390 days on one side and then 40 days on the other side, and each day representing a year. Okay.
Right.
First for
Mhm.
Israel and then for Judah.
Right.
And, and then also, I think another perspective that a lot of people don't really consider in this perspective is regarding days. Well, on the
Mhm.
seventh day, we're to rest, right? Well, then also in the Torah, it gives on the every seventh year, the land
Right.
rests. Okay.
Exactly.
So we have a day and a year theory just the same.
Mhm.
So there's something to be said. Now, what if is my question here? Again, I'm not declaring this as so, but something for us to pray about. What if this day year theory was to be applied to the 400 years to Abraham?
Mhm.
Okay. We know it was fulfilled by way of years already, but
Mhm.
what if it is to be applied by days in the end times? That's the viewpoint I want to present. Are you with me so far?
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. Okay. I think it would be wise for us to remember that history is cyclical. Okay.
Right. Right.
According to Ecclesiastes 1:9, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. And then you got Isaiah 46:10. I make known the end from the beginning, ancient times, what is still to come.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard that remark of how history repeats itself, and then I heard a guy the other day on the radio say that at least it harmonizes.
right,
You
right,
know.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that each time is going to be exactly identical, of
Right.
course, but there's still
Absolutely.
types and shadows that were there
Yeah.
for us to look at what to be
Mhm.
viewing for the future, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that all being said, excuse me again. If this 400 years was brought about, okay, well, first, this 400 years brought about the covenant,
Mhm.
okay, that with Abraham, and I call it the eternal covenant. And this is the father of the faith we're talking about. So I'm wondering if this 400 could really play a role in the end times. Now, I do find it interesting. I don't know if you have been watching, current events. I get emails and messages all the time regarding stuff.
Everybody's
And
feeding you.
yeah, and it's kind of to have a confession here. It gets like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. It's like there's
Mhm.
so much going on, and
Yeah.
I got to confess, sometimes I got to pull myself away from it because my mind is already tracking within times.
Mhm.
That it doesn't take much for me to bunny trail. Pick a topic, I'm going to bunny trail to the end times in a minute.
Yes.
It's just the way that happens for me. But
Mhm.
I do find it interesting that this peace accord that they're trying to work on now is called the Abraham Accord.
Yes. Isn't that something?
Yeah, I'm going, okay, this is interesting. And here I am at the same time frame, I'm discussing, studying out these 400 days of Abraham. So you can't help but wonder if this could be what brings about the verse that everybody talks about in 1 Thessalonians 5, where it says, well, people are saying peace and safety, sudden destruction comes.
Mhm.
And, that's something that everyone's keeping their eye on, and it has been for the last how many years, right?
Right. Right.
So I guess my question is regarding this Abraham Accord, which I still shake my head at thinking they're naming it Abraham Accord. But, and I get the reason. It's because, the Christians and Muslims and Jews all claim Abraham as their father. Okay, so
Right.
that's the purpose. Okay.
Mhm.
So could this 400 days or 400 start when Yeshua starts the new covenant with his bride? Now, I have a teaching, I don't know if you've ever seen it, called the Eternal Covenant. And
Okay.
out of all the covenants, okay, the Abrahamic covenant is the eternal covenant.
Mhm.
Because if you think about it, Abraham was asleep. Okay. It
Yes.
was Yahweh making the promises.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
So
right.
this is a covenant that will never be broken.
Right.
All the promises are on him.
Yep. That's
And
right.
so I go into that teaching as far as the eternal covenant. That's the eternal covenant. And this is the eternal covenant that Yeshua reinstalls and gets it going again by way of the
Mhm.
new covenant, if you will. It's
Right.
really a cool teaching if you ever get a chance to check it out. I'm pretty excited about that one.
Yeah.
So what if this is the time frame that initiates the 400 days given to Abraham? You know, we all ponder and try to figure exactly what Yeshua meant when he says, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. And that's in Matthew
Mhm.
24:22. You know, what was he saying there?
Mhm.
And well, here's a thought. What if it's the 390 days given to the northern kingdom and the
Mhm.
40 days given to Judah in Ezekiel 4? Okay, because the 390 and 40
430.
totals exactly
Yeah.
430. And that was what was given from Abraham, fulfilled at Abraham to Moses.
Right.
Okay. But when you think about it, there was only 400 years specifically that they were being mistreated and
Mhm.
enslaved, if you
Right.
will. So my question is, could it be those 430 years
Mhm.
are to be applied in the end times by way of days, but
Okay.
Yeshua cuts them short to the 400 days, the bare
Ah.
minimum.
Okay. Okay.
So now you got the 390 and 10. The 40 days is cut down to just 10.
Mhm.
And then that immediately makes me think of Smyrna, because you got the 10 days. He said you'll be in prison for 10 days. So
Right.
there's something to be cautiously wondering, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, if this is to be applied, if this is even something remotely possible, the question is, when would these 400 days start and when would the 400 days be completed? That's the question. And so this is where I'm going to go from here on out. Going on the assumption, and I do say assumption, that the 400 days given to Abraham, or 400 years given to Abraham, are to be applied in the end times by way of days. Now, wrong or right, my mindset has been that the Battle of Armageddon will be taking place on the last day of Sukkot. That's just something that maybe I've brainwashed myself. I don't know, but
Okay.
it's
Mhm.
just that's just kind of where I'm at. The Battle of Armageddon takes place on the last day of Sukkot. So, and I kind of go with that from Revelation 16:14, where
Uh-huh.
it says that he gathers, the demons gather all the kings and armies together for the great day of God Almighty. That's what
Yes.
it says. And so my mindset when I read that verse, I always think of, well, what's the last day of Sukkot? It's the last great day.
Right.
So here we have the
Right.
great day of God Almighty.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, I'm not declaring that as fact, but that's kind of where my mind has been
Right.
tracking for
Okay.
the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Now, okay, are you with me so far? Am I lost
Yeah.
you anywhere?
Absolutely. No.
Okay, okay,
This is great.
okay. So when would his people be delivered in these 400 days is my question. Would it be the last day of Sukkot? I would say no. It would have to be before then. So my mindset is going, he delivers his people at the end of the 400 days on the Day of Atonement. That's when their atonement is paid for and they're
Mhm.
immediately protected at that time. And then the remaining days are going to be judgment of the bowls coming down on those who persecuted his people, if you will.
Mhm. Okay.
That being during the time of Sukkot, okay, and
Right.
closing out last day of Sukkot. Now, if that's true, the 400 ends on the Day of Atonement. That would mean the 390 ends on the Day of Trumpets. So we have two significant days that these
Yes.
things fall on in
Mhm.
that perspective. Again, I get it, it's theory. So that being said, on the calendar that we follow, this is going to, this is just so funny. Now, I know there's lots of different calendars out there, and I'm
Right.
not declaring mine's the right one,
Right.
I
Right.
believe
No.
it is. If I didn't think it was, I wouldn't be on
Yeah.
it. Okay. But
Right.
I greatly respect all the other calendars, and I mean that. I
Mhm.
really do. Um,
Mhm.
the biggest thing, as long as people are following a calendar, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
We,
Right.
we know he's got something, and we're all trying to get the right one. Okay.
Right.
Now, The Day of Atonement of 2021, okay, if we go back 400 years, 400 days it is, Day of Atonement 2021, next year, and you go back 400 days, you land on the 24th day of the 6th month. Now, some might say, well, what's this? What's the big deal? What's the significance? Well, in Haggai chapter 1, okay, we find that this is the day when the remnant starts rebuilding the temple. Okay.
Oh,
Right. This is Haggai chapter 1, verses 13 through 15. And Yahweh, to kind of set a precedence here, or the context, the previous verses, Yahweh's, basically saying, hey, you guys, you built the wall great, but my house is in ruins, and you guys are all here living in, fixing your places all up nice and fine, but mine house is in ruins. It's time for that to change. Okay. And so it's the 24th day. And what I love about this, I'm going to read a verse here. It says in the verse 14, it says, in the spirit of the whole remnant of the people, they all came together and began to work on the house of Yahweh. What I love about this, it says it's the remnant of the people began to work on the house of Yahweh. Now, why is that significant? Well, because Yahweh had the people of Israel make the tabernacle and all the articles for it when he brought his people out of Egypt. For one full year, when he's with his bride, after Shavuot, he's with his bride for one full year, and during that one full year, they're making the tabernacle and all the articles.
Right.
So I think there's a significance here. And remember, if I can say this, I think it's interesting to note that Yahweh is keeping his own law. According to Deuteronomy 24:5, if a man takes a bride, he's to have 1 year, no war and no work.
That's right. Yep.
So that's what he's
Perfect time
doing.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So here we have in Haggai, we see a remnant delivered from Babylon and building as well on the 24th day of the 6th month. They're delivered and that's the remnant, and then they're what? They're building.
Yes.
So if ancient times reveal the future, could this date of the 24th day of the 6th month be significant? That's a question. Okay. Now I know people say, "Oh man, Steve, nobody knows the day or the hour." Well, I kind of differ with that.
Yeah. See, I've always thought. I mean, I've always understood that when Yeshua said that about no man knowing the day nor the hour, that he was speaking of the day of which no man knows neither the day nor the hour, and that day is the first day of every Hebraic month.
Okay.
And in particular, the first day of the month, which is, the Feast of Trumpets.
Trumpets, right.
That's right.
Right. And I can see that perspective very much.
Yeah.
I have a teaching titled Knowing the Day. And so I show forth how, my opinion, that we can know the day when it gets closer. Okay.
Right.
But we will never know the hour. Okay.
Right.
But even then, knowing the day is going to be contingent upon watching the times, or you're going to see it, and there's so much with that, because even I think it's the Church of Smyrna. He says, look, if you don't wake up, you're not going to know,
Yeah.
So it's like there's an element of being awake and being in obedience to him.
Right.
Okay, so the thing is, if this day, 24th day of the 6th month, is significant, could, and I say could, the remnant who is saved out of Babylon the Great, okay, that being the 144,000, in my opinion, and they're also called first fruits, okay, the 144,000 are in Revelation 14. Could they be ones who will start rebuilding the new tabernacle, if you will, going for the millennium? My mindset is, I know some people don't have this viewpoint, that's totally fine, but I just struggle seeing a stone temple in the millennium. If you read Ezekiel 44 on, you don't see it. I think you see all the buildings around it, but I think Yeshua will have the tabernacle just like it was in the days of Moses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a teaching called the tent, and so that kind of supports that and why I view that perspective. But that's a side note. But regarding this perspective of 2020 applying this year, okay, 24th day of the 6th month. Now, are you familiar with Jonathan Cahn?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I've interviewed him actually.
Oh,
back
cool.
back in the days before he was a rock star, when I was actually able to call his secretary and arrange an interview with him. Now you could spend 6 months trying to get through to him to talk to him now,
Right.
because he's got layers of protection. But yeah. Oh yeah. I have not read, I haven't stayed caught up on his books. I read The Harbinger, of course,
Mhm.
and that, all that. But I've got a book of one of his latest books sitting in my bedroom, and so far it hasn't been cracked. I need to crack it and read it, because I really think he's got a lot of revelation. I think.
Oh man, yes. Yeah, I'm right there with you. In fact, I remember when his book, The Harbinger, came out.
Yeah.
It was like some friends sent it to me, and I glanced through it. I confession, I just don't read everything that comes to me, but I did glance through it, and it had my eyebrows raising quite a few times, because he had some very intriguing points.
Right.
Points that I think that you can't shrug off. It's like,
Right. Well, the thing I love about it is the fact that the prophecies that were given to early Israel, they came down. I mean, the punishments came down on them exactly as prophesied, but then they came down upon us in America in great detail. And I'm going,
yes,
what does that tell you? Does that tell you
right,
that maybe we are them?
right.
It's really
Yep.
very amazing.
Yeah, I am so right there with you. Well, a friend of mine had sent me an interview with Jonathan Cahn. I guess it just took place maybe like, I want to say 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
And it was right in time as I'm studying all this stuff with the 400, okay, with Abraham and what have you. And he's got a new book. It's called The Harbinger 2. Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's evidently, it just came out this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
At that time, at the time of the interview, it wasn't even out yet. And so, out of confession, now I'm sure I disagree with him on some things, as we all disagree with people on everything, of course.
Right.
But he had something to say about this book, and he says, "Look, here's the deal." He goes, "Back in the days, okay, now I can't validate this, because I haven't read his book yet, but what he was saying is that in the ancient times, when they received their harbinger, okay, it was 19 years later that they received their judgment. So the harbinger came, and then 19 years later came their judgment. Now, do the math. If we are them today, like you even said, well, 19 years later, after 2001, takes us to 2020.
Yeah.
So it's like, here we are.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, oh my goodness, this is kind of crazy. And so, and I'm trying to see how we apply that which is then to today and what have you. And it really had me questioning, like, is this even plausible? Is this making sense? So here's the thing. Back in 2001, my friend and I, we went to our calendar, how we figure out the calendar. We went back to 2001, and we figured out what day 9/11 fell on.
Right.
Now, I know
you mean on the Hebrew calendar. Yeah.
on the Hebrew calendar that we follow. Again, there's so many different Hebrew calendars. I'm not offended at people disagreeing. But on the Hebrew calendar that we follow, 9/11 fell on the 24th day of the 6th month.
Wow.
Okay. Well, just hold on to this. 19 years later, this year, 9/11 falls on the 24th day of the 6th month. It's identical. I'm going, so as I'm kind of going through this, I'm going, this is like to the day.
Yeah.
And we're not talking close. We're going like, this is kind of like, it's nailing it,
How many of these have to happen before we realize that there really is something going on here?
Right. And again, I'm not saying this is what is going to happen. That's not it. Because quite honestly, what I'm presenting with the 400-year type theory, I think it can be applied to multiple years, even multiple times throughout the year. Pick it how you end it and start it. I'm just saying this 400 thing is something we need to be mindful of. And so because of that, I'm being mindful of it now. How should it apply? And when I did this, I'm going, man, it's rocking it right now.
Yeah.
On a very significant date, with America anyway.
Yes.
Now, as I'm going through this, I'm finding how this is all lining up. Adding on top of it, I found that September 11th is a Friday. Okay. And that the 24th day of the 6th month starts on the evening of that Friday. Okay. Well, which happens to be a Sabbath.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I'm going, oh, wait a minute. Could this be what we've all been thinking about when Yeshua says, pray your flight doesn't take place in the winter or the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Right. Because I've been thinking for a long time, wrong or right, I don't know, but that when Yeshua said, pray your flight will not take place in the winter or the Sabbath, I'm thinking bookends. It's
Right.
like he's giving us the beginning and the end of the tribulation.
Mhm.
And the beginning would be the Sabbath, and
Mhm.
the end would be the winter. And Sukkot is what? It's after the equinox. And I think what people
Yeah.
need to realize is there's no really spring or fall in the Bible. It's summer or winter.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so that means after the fall equinox, what we call the fall equinox, that's really the beginning of winter,
Right.
biblically speaking.
Mhm.
So we could possibly be looking at bookends. Prayer
Uh-huh.
flight does not take place in winter or the Sabbath. That's bookends. You know, winter,
Yeah.
the Sabbath would be the beginning
Mhm.
to a year to next year at the time of Sukkot, end of Sukkot. Well, that's when I believe the second Exodus will be taking place from the
Uh-huh.
survivors of the tribulation
Right.
right at the end. So it makes sense. Prayer flight does not take place then.
Right.
Anyway, that's a side note
Wow.
here.
No,
Is
no,
that all
that's
making
amazing.
sense? Am I
Oh
okay?
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, what's astounding me is how many days are falling in place.
Yeah.
And that's very, very thought provoking.
Yes. Agreed. You know, that's what I think too. Is things are thought provoking, and that's what I guess I'm praying that people would at least
Yeah.
think about it. You know, well,
Yeah.
and in line with that element of things starting on a Sabbath or just before a Sabbath,
Mm-hmm.
you go to Matthew 24, and this is where, you know, he says, as it was in the days of Noah. I'm looking at right now, verse 37 through 41. You know, so will it be in the end times when Yeshua returns. And it says, um, verse 39, they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. And
Right.
then he says, this is kind of interesting. He says, that is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. And then it says, 2 men will be in the field, one taken, the other
Mm-hmm.
left, 2 women grinding with a hand mill, the other taken, the other left. Well, that could be like prepping for the Sabbath
Sabbath.
itself, right? You know,
Yeah.
they're grinding, getting the challah bread going, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
You know, you
Right.
can see the correlation there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, again, even if nothing happens this year, I still believe this 400 time frame is something for us to just
Yeah.
keep in mind.
Yep.
And for me, with how it falls this year,
Mm-hmm.
okay, from Day of Atonement next year to now,
Right.
it lands us at the grape harvest. Right now, the whole world is experiencing the time of the grape harvest. Now, pending where you live in your elevation and what have you, if I'm not mistaken, let's see, today is September 1st.
Yes.
I'm not mistaken. I think the grape harvest actually officially started in some areas about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And then it's projected to go another 2 to 3 weeks easy, pending
Uh-huh.
where you're at, you know, colder
Right.
elevations and what have you,
Mm-hmm.
and could be even a little more, but a good 3 weeks hands out.
Right.
So that lets me know that this 400-day time
Uh-huh.
right in the midst of the summer harvest, you know, going
Right.
into the fall time. And there's multiple verses that talk about judgment coming at the grape harvest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go to Micah chapter 7, it talks multiple times how, verse 13, it says, I will take away their harvest, declares Yahweh. There will be no grapes on the vine, there will be no figs in the tree, and their leaves will wither. So we're talking, that's grape time, that's grape harvest, you know.
Yes.
Joel 1, the fields are ruined, the ground is dried up. And then it goes on to the new wine is dried up, the olive oil fails, despair you farmers, all these different things. This, again, olives, that's fall, that's their grape
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple verses that discuss judgment coming at
Yes.
this time frame. And again, I'm not declaring this is what it's going to be. I'm
Yeah.
simply saying these are verses that give us something to consider, if
Yeah.
I can say it that way.
And this may or may not have anything to do with what you're saying, but look at what's happening to America right now. I mean, we're going through a destruction. I mean,
Yes.
and huge amounts of fire. I mean, Colorado is being burned up right now,
Yep.
and California, of course, and of course you heard about Australia. I mean,
Yes.
Australia had fires like they've never had in their entire existence.
Hmm.
So there's and I remember the word saying something about that the next time our punishment would be by fire instead of by water. Even
That's
though
right.
even though there's been water-based punishment too. You know,
Mhm.
you heard that, for instance, Iowa, that 1/3 of all the cropland in Iowa was destroyed here just recently in a matter of 2 or 3 days. It was a very short time it took for it to completely destroy it. So we are undergoing judgment, and I don't think anybody who has a problem with that, they're just gonna have to get before Abba and pray to him and ask him whether or not that's what's going on, because
Right.
it sure is harming us.
Oh man, it's so interesting that you bring this up. This isn't even in my notes, but I was just talking to a friend the other day, and he spoke with two different farmers from totally different locations and what have
Yes.
you. And he said that they were saying that their, farm yielding
Yeah.
crops and stuff, it's hardly 30% of what
Yeah.
they're used to having.
Exactly.
And they even said like, it's like, God just turned the volume down. And when
Yeah.
they said that to him, it's like he immediately thought of Haggai chapter 1. And I mentioned the other verses in Haggai 1. Well,
Okay.
with what we've just said in context here. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, this is what Yahweh Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. Verse 6. You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in the purse with holes in it. And so
Wow.
it's like everything you're doing, it's just
Mhm.
falling. Your crops,
Right.
everything. And so it's like, and this is in the context about the 24th day of the 6th month that they woke up.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
so I'm going, my goodness, are you kidding me? And so it's so interesting that you even bring that up, how this is the time that so much is going on. Well, in the context of looking at a great harvest time frame also,
Mhm.
Amos 1. Amos points to a summer harvest judgment. It
Mhm.
says, this is what Yahweh showed me, a basket of ripe fruit. And it's actually the word there for it is even summer. He goes, what do you see, Amos? He asked. A basket of ripe fruit, I answered. Then Yahweh said to me, the time is ripe for my people Israel. I will spare them no longer. So again,
Whoa.
yeah, I'm going, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And so
Mm.
it's the end of summer, when the grapes are harvested.
Yes.
And what's that verse? Forgive me, it just came to mind. It says, the harvest is past, summer is over, the harvest is past, and
Mhm.
and we are not saved. And that's
Yes.
them looking retrospect.
Yes.
So it's like it's at the end of summer, and we're not saved. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
uh,
And the very things that are destroying us right now are being pointed to by those who oppose him and oppose us, and they're saying this is because you're not letting us control things. You're not letting us run your government the way it needs to be run. You're not letting us run your lives.
right.
It's just astounding. Wow.
Yep. Yep. Amen. Here's another verse. It's in Isaiah 18. It says, for before the harvest, when the blossom is gone and the flower becomes a ripening grape, he will cut off the shoots with pruning knives and cut down and take away the spreading branches. Now, here's the thing. This particular version says, for before the harvest. And I looked it up in the actual Hebrew. It can actually be translated when to face the harvest, meaning when you're getting ready to go harvest, right there. It's like
Yes.
it's right in
Uh-huh.
front of you, to face it. It's right in front of you.
Mm.
And which quite honestly puts more sense to the rest of the verse because it says the ripening grapes. They're
Right.
ripe, you know.
Hmm.
And so it's not before, it's right at the time of harvest.
Right.
And it just makes far more sense. And as I started praying about this, I'm going, okay, Father, if I'm even remotely close,
Yeah.
just help me keep my head first. And then just to kind of keep my focus. And then as I was thinking about it more, this is right in line with Revelation 14.
Hmm.
Revelation 14 discusses the 144,000 there for a while in the opening verses. And then around verse 14, scenes change, and you see where Yeshua, it says like a son of man, he comes down, and it says he takes his sickle and he harvests it, okay?
Hmm.
And remember, the 144,000 are called first fruits.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
this is what happens. There's this guy, Yeshua, guy in
Uh-huh.
white, he comes and harvests. And then immediately after, going around verse 17, you see another angel comes out, and then it says, he goes forth, and then he puts a sharp sickle for the grapes of wrath. Okay, it's like 1 and 2, first
Hmm.
fruits, and then the rest are for wrath. And actually the word wrath there is actually bad because it actually means for just, anger, judgment. And that's what Yahweh does. Think of it whenever he, would put judgment on his people when he sent them to Babylon. Okay, it wasn't
Right.
wrath, but it was still judgment and anger that he had on them,
Right.
And
Right.
so we're looking at that time. It's going to be a time of, judgment on his people.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Man,
Well,
I think of all this stuff. Go ahead.
and
I'm just going to say
and
something.
it feels so much like the time of Jacob's trouble.
Yes.
I mean, it really does. Because I mean, the fact of the matter is that we as a people, and I'm not just talking about America, but in certain respects, I'm talking about America because this is where I am. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact of the matter is that we've killed 60 million of our own.
Right. Oh, man.
One out of every 7 Americans that should be alive today is not because we killed them.
Right.
And that blows my mind. And if we think that Abba is going to turn his face from that and not pay attention to that,
Mm-hmm.
we don't understand his nature.
Amen.
You
Oh,
know,
man. Amen.
and a lot of things. And of course, we certainly haven't observed the 7-year, the agricultural Shabbat. Nothing about that. We've not done that either. And in the past, he has basically torn people away from the land to give the land a break. And do we think he's going to do it any differently with us?
Right.
You know?
Yep. You're right. Amen. No, you're nailing it, brother. And starting to wrap this up, I really believe that when everything starts,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to come at a time, for the most part, when his people aren't looking, aren't ready.
Right.
And minus those who are obviously they've got their antennas up. They're
Right.
looking and watching
Right.
you. And there's always that remnant, and that's why I
Right.
say remnant.
Mm-hmm.
Because even the church, like I said earlier, I think it was the church of Sardis in Revelation 3, that if they didn't wake up, they
Yes.
weren't going to know. And I think something to remember here is that the 7 churches then, they were considered Torah believers, okay? And
Yes.
so that would mean they were at least knowing of of the feast days, the holy
Right.
days, and so
Right.
they were observing them somewhat, okay?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that would mean they would be mindful of those times as a plausible time Yeshua would be looking for him.
Right.
So if they were Church of Sardis would have been looking on those days, yet he says, you're not going to know. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, I know this goes against what a lot of us think that, he's going to come on trumpets or whatever. Because I've had that view for a long time too, but I'm starting to think that it's going to happen when we
Yeah.
aren't looking.
Mm-hmm.
And now the end, when he enters into Jerusalem after Armageddon and stuff, yes, and that's why I really believe it's the last day of Sukkot.
Mm-hmm.
But as I'm looking at all this 400 days / years, there's something to this,
Yeah.
and I'm just asking people to pray about it.
Yes.
Again, whether it happens this year or not, well, that's yet to be seen. We've only got a couple weeks out of this recording here to
Mm-hmm.
watch and see. But even if it's not per se on that particular day, this is still a season for us to watch. And I think in all of this study that I've been doing, it's opened my eyes more so to the grape harvest season for us to be watching. You know,
Yes.
um, I guess, and it's not that I didn't know these verses existed, but I guess it's just ringing in my heart more now. I
Mm-hmm.
guess I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, can I prevail upon you to return and take us further down this path?
Yeah,
Because
that'd be great.
because I know that you don't you're not much in favor of doing long presentations, and I completely understand because I in my mind I see people start to go
Right.
even no matter how wonderful it is, no matter how good it is,
Yep.
people's attention spans are people's attention spans.
Yep.
But this is really good stuff, and I really would love to hear all of it. So if you're all right with doing some more with us, in the near future, that'd be great. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to bash you over the head with that either.
Oh no, that
However
sounds
that
good.
works for you, that'd be really
I,
great.
I think it'd be good to let's let some time go by, and if then nothing
Yeah,
happens, this coming fall feast, we can see, well, okay, Steve, if this applies, how would it apply in future, something like that
yeah,
nature.
right, absolutely, yeah. But this will really cause people to give some thought to this because the thing that really rings a bell with me is the fact that when you when you figure backward to see, like when you went back to try to find the beginning of the 400 days, and where does it land? It's not just any old day.
Right.
That's when it starts to really ring my bell, because of the fact that what you're doing is it's like putting together a puzzle.
Right.
You're fitting the pieces, and the pieces are fitting beyond what you ever thought.
Right.
And that you're not saying, wow, I've got the whole thing figured out, but I do have this chunk over here seems to fit together, and so we need to consider that, and we need to be watching very closely. So yeah,
Amen.
I would love that. I would really love that. So
Cool. I would love it too, brother.
great. If that's all right with you, then we'll do that. But
Very
really,
nice.
it's good to have you back, and great to talk to you and to look at you. And I will look forward to our next time when we do this. Okay.
Sounds good, brother.
Great. Okay. And I always say at the end of all my podcasts these days, I say to the audience, I say, remember who you are.